This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is David Rosmarin. The topic, anxiety. That is a perfect word for right now. So many people are burdened with anxiety. They can't move because of anxiety. They can't figure it out because of anxiety. They're flat on their back because of anxiety. Other people look at anxiety as a gift. This gives me opportunity. They look at anxiety as a compass. Ooh, let me go this direction. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit hard, but let me go this direction. The question you have to ask yourself, where are you currently on the spectrum with your understanding of anxiety? And would you like to do a better job at your understanding of it? My guest today, David Rosmarin, has insights, has perspectives. And without any further delay from me, let's jump right in and talk a little bit about thriving with anxiety. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Here's where I want to jump in today. Before we get into solving or finding ways to mitigate our anxiety or to live with it or to embrace it or to find that it's maybe not something to try to run from. Before we get into all of that, I would love to open up a little bit of a philosophical conversation to begin with about anxiety in the modern age right now, today in 2023, and what has happened. Because to me, I don't think there's any way that we can get to such a place of anxiousness, such a place of anxiety with so many people. Of course, we're all connected now. Half my life internet, half my life not internet. We're all connected now. Everyone's being ginned up. We had a COVID spell that probably has not helped at all with something like anxiety. But can we keep it at the modern moment? Why do you think there is so much anxiety? It's foreign to me. I get it at a certain level. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an author. I probably intuitively recognize some of where your writing goes, and I probably harness this for my own being. I can observe a lot of people out there that seem to be just stuck in the anxious moment and unable to get out. To me, and I'll just let you go here, to me, it feels engineered.
Okay, firstly, it's a great question, and it's exactly the question to be asking. Why are we so anxious today? I want to amplify the question, substantiate that we are, in fact, more anxious today, because it's not just about more recognition of mental health and mental illness or mental distress. Some people still think that it's not. It's more a matter of identification and more a matter of people reporting it. There are objective behavioral measures that mental health is off a cliff today in the Western world. The suicide rate is through the roof. It's the second leading cause of death in individuals under age 35, including ages 10 to 14. The number one cause of disability in America is depression and anxiety. Never before in history, not even after the Vietnam War, was it so common for people to go on leave at all, and certainly not because of mental health crises. The number of people on medications, although that could be due to identification. Non-suicidal self-injury, the number of people harming themselves in order to cope with negative emotions. It's a fifth of teenagers today. And objectively, the levels of anxiety of healthy school children are that of psychiatric inpatients of the 1950s. So I'm amplifying your question by saying, why on earth are we so anxious? Am I getting it right?
Yes, I would start to unpack it by saying, okay, clearly technology has played a role here, but then, okay, technology is just ubiquitous. Technology itself is not doing it, but I think the way we're using the technology for the constant comparisons, that I am comparing myself to some person, some Instagram picture, which could be fake, probably is fake. And then if you just expand that out, iterate that out, it's not hard to imagine how we've got to this point. We've done it to ourselves.
Yeah, you're starting to answer the question. And I do think that technology has something to do with it. And you're mentioning the social media, and the psychiatric literature and social psychology literature has highlighted that. So I hear where you're coming from, but I actually think there's something much more fundamental, which is driving our anxiety epidemic today.
Throw it at me.
We have turned anxiety and mental distress into something to fear, as opposed to recognizing that we are not going to feel good all the time. We are going to have levels of distress. We are going to have struggles. Life is going to be uncertain. Things are going to be unpredictable and out of our control. And for all of human history, we have had less control. We have had less predictability. It's in this technological and modern era, it's not just pixelated technology, medical technology, the economy. It's amazing. In wealthier nations, you have higher levels of anxiety. In middle-income countries and countries, there's half, and then another half, the level of anxiety that we have in the United States and Canada and France and other high-income countries today. If you live in a place where some warlord could just come through and take down your whole village in a minute, then you don't judge yourself for feeling uncomfortable day to day because you realize that's called a normal Tuesday. That's just the way it is. But in our society, where things are generally fairly predictable and generally fairly controlled, and technology has helped to make that more comfortable and controlled, we are so unmoored by our own emotions. Because the minute I feel uncomfortable, now something's not wrong with the world, something's wrong with me. And if I perceive my own anxiety as a threat, physiologically, do you know what's going to happen?
It's going to become real.
It's going to become real, exactly. Your body's going to dump adrenaline in to the slightest tick in anxiety. If you wake up today and you're feeling uncomfortable, you say to yourself, oh my God, I have a psychiatric disorder. Something is wrong with me. I need to get rid of these feelings. I need some sort of medication to put away. I can't handle this. And that's the message that we have sent out day and night, is that we can't handle strong emotions. We can't handle difficult emotions. Something's wrong with us when we have these problems. By and large, that's just not the way human beings have ever lived. Emotional disruptions, emotional difficulties are part of life, and we are not accepting that. So to me, I think we have turned anxiety into something to fear, and in doing so, we have created the anxiety epidemic.
I think we also have to be honest here. Full disclosure, this is two white guys talking, but clearly this also divides and is different for men and women. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Let me share a little story that happened to me the other day that I think is right in the headspace of where you're going. You might disagree, but I think it is. There was a conversation about a guest coming on this podcast. The guest had written essentially a work that sounds very different than where you've gone. And the work was more about embracing feelings and talking about our emotions, what I would jokingly refer to as, instead of going down this path of being a little bit tougher, understanding where we've come in terms of our humanity and the way Homo sapiens have evolved, it was more like, hey, let's do the kumbaya group hug. And inside this pitch to me, there was a very clear negative that Stoicism is bad. I thought to myself, my gosh, I've had Ryan Holiday on this podcast. I've had Tim Ferriss. These are two guys, very successful. People can like them or not like them or whatever, but they've done some really interesting work in bringing some of the Stoicism thinking to life. I think it might have been Ferriss who said it, that you could think of the Stoics as being angry Buddhists. And here I am living in a Buddhist country for the last 10 years. There is something to even though I'm not studying Buddhism, there is an osmosis to living in this society where so many people are Buddhists. My point being is that I said, hey, I would like to talk to this guest about her anti-Stoicism perspective, because I probably share a different perspective. Is that going to be okay? The guest immediately declined the interview. And I think that sums up a little bit right there. She must have been feeling anxiety that I was not willing to have the conversation to just let her say what she wants to say about Stoicism, and that I might counter something. There might be a conversation, and wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, it was all over. To me, it felt like I was thinking about that before getting on the call with you today. I was like, gosh, how could just a concept, a philosophical concept, cause somebody to break down? Why not just have the conversation? What is scary about having the conversation with, I'm not a flamethrower, talk to everybody under the sun? When you hear a story like that, how does it make you feel? How does it make you think?
I'm not surprised at all. Not knowing the characters, of course, and not making any character judgments, but I'm not surprised at all. We live in an era of cancel culture where the minute things make us uncomfortable, we think that it's actually important for us to stop feeling that way. We are worshiping the god of emotional equanimity, and it is killing our culture. What you're saying is even more fascinating. It's actually killing the development of ideas and the development of intellectual growth. I'm speaking from a psychiatric perspective. I'm saying our mental health is in the gutter because of this. And I think you're right. I think there are other sequelae as well, intellectually, probably from a business perspective. You see what's happening all over the place. You mentioned about being two white guys, though. So I just want to go back to that in terms of race. Often, socioeconomically disadvantaged individuals sometimes have better mental health and more resilience because it's not expected that things are going to be good all the time. When people have experienced as well, whether it's discrimination or whether it's racism, these are, I hate to say this, it's unpleasant.
The world's not fair. It's messy. Toughen up, Buttercup.
Well, I'm not saying toughen up, Buttercup. That's where I was going to stop. With regards to the Stoicism, there is a very delicate line, and I want to be extremely careful to stay on the right side of it. Yes, we need to be more accepting of negative emotions, but it's not a toughen up. It's a, yeah, it's hard. And we have to go from a place of it being hard.
Why did toughen up cause you to pause for a second there?
Because it's invalidating and it sends the message that your feelings don't matter. And it's not that they don't matter, they do matter, but it's going to be hard, but we have to go forward from a place of it being hard. Toughen up is that old, what's coming to my mind is almost that old British way of keep on, carry on, everything's fine. No, everything is not fine. It is a war. People are dying. It's a hard situation. We're all having hard emotions. There's incredible racism. There are problems. We're not saying that everything is fine. I'm not going to say that anxiety is fun. I've had panic attacks before. It's hell. It is not a fun experience. I'm not going to pretend to say that anxiety and emotional distress are a enjoyable experience. They're not. They're horrific. They feel like death, but that doesn't mean that I can't handle it.
Let me add something, though, too. A phrase like toughen up, you're a very wise guy who's Harvard affiliated. You've been at the highest levels of academia. But I think amongst friends is a simple heuristic. A lot of people might say toughen up without there being all kinds of negative anything behind it. It's more, hey, we know we have to, you just poked a little bit fun at the British, the stiff upper lip thing, but people know we have these simple ways. You've got some more advanced thinking in your work, but some simple ways to deal with anxiety over the years. It doesn't necessarily mean, okay, all your emotions, we're not going to talk about it. Just don't think about it, whatever. But toughen up could just be a simple heuristic to try to get to a similar place to where you want to go.
Yes, if there's the language and then there's the concept behind language. And if we have an understanding that, yeah, it's hard. We have to go together. I will be with you. You're not alone. Let's embrace this. This is part of our humanity. This is not the way human beings. We're not supposed to be without our challenges. Those challenges, we can actually parlay them into areas of growth. There's post-traumatic growth. There are ways that we can accept difficulty and then move forward. If all those commentary pieces are packed into your quick phrase, toughen up, then I guess so. It doesn't sound like that to me, but yeah, between friends, I could see that potentially between friends.
Let me bring it to something like COVID and the after effects of something like COVID. I still see people, primarily ladies, that don't by any normal just appearance look to be at the high risk place of COVID. And I think COVID, by and large, the high risk part of it is probably over, but I still see the mask wearing, whether I'm in Asia, whether I'm in America. That's got to be a person that's feeling very anxious. That's got to be a person that's feeling high anxiety. Then you look around, you might see somebody walking right next to them that are laughing, joking, no mask on, clearly not thinking about that at all. Say it's almost like a prison for some folks that are in that place where nobody rang the bell and said, hey, it's over, or they didn't believe it. Or we brought them so far into the fear during that moment that they can't escape. To me, that seems like one of the most tangible examples right now. I know from a education perspective, especially the young kids, the socialization, the lack of school, those are a whole host of issues that happened during the last 3 or 4 years. How do you deal with something like that where you're making the case, hey, you're not alone, we're in this together, but it does become an interesting scenario where some group of people might be in an entirely different world, for example, still wanting to wear a mask, perhaps irrational fears, and then other people are leading a normal life. What am I supposed to do? What's the conversation? How am I supposed to assist that person? You see the line that I'm drawing here?
I do. Let me clarify a couple things. Firstly, you never know why someone's wearing a mask. There could be a zillion reasons. They might live with someone who's immunocompromised. I live in Boston, where, like you said, a lot of people are healthy, and whether they're male or female, walking around wearing masks, often they're in healthcare. They may work with high-risk populations. So you never really know. At the same time,
but this wasn't before COVID.
At the same time, I fully agree with you. If somebody is trying to mitigate uncertainty, trying to increase their control over the world by wearing a mask today, it really is an attempt to get a handle on your emotions, as opposed to understanding that there's going to be some degree of uncertainty in life. It doesn't have to be COVID. It could be something else that takes you out or gets you sick or takes you down. There's really no end to the amount of efforts that we can expend in order to protect ourselves. And at what point do we actually say, this is a reasonable set of risks that I need to live with this amount of uncertainty? And I think that's really the core here. We have created a society that cannot live with uncertainty, that cannot live with any degree of uncontrollability, that cannot live with any degree of emotional difficulty. And as a result, we are suffering more than ever.
When you make those last few sentences, I am 100% right there, the exact same page. I think the interesting thing, when I talk to people like yourself, people that have achieved at the highest level of academics, I think sometimes for me as an outsider, you make that very forceful, strong statement, this inability to deal with uncertainty. But then there's always the footnote, but hold on, we've got to go over here and we've got to do the Dr. Phil Oprah thing. Then I start to think, my God, but then that's where we keep ending up with no progress, because we've got brilliant people like you saying something brilliant, like you just said. And then on the flip side, we've got to go over here and then still stay in the world and still hold hands with the people that are stuck. They're not really getting unstuck, which you're making the case in this conversation already about the current mental health issues. You see where I'm going?
Let me be very clear. It's not they people and me people. It's we people. I get stuck all the time. The other day, I woke up feeling anxious and panicky. There's so many things, that massive pressures that are going on in my life, if I'm really being honest, whether it's academic pressure, whether it's with my clinics. We have over 1,000 active patients. A typical week, I get a phone call or I get a message about someone who's in acute crisis, who's in our care, and I have to make decisions or help my staff to make decisions that are going to be in that person's best interest and that of their families. And it affects tens, if not hundreds of people.
You love your life, though. You love what you're doing.
I do love what I'm doing because I feel like I'm having an impact. But if I told you that it was easy, I'd be lying.
What in life is easy gets great results. Everything that's worth doing is hard, right?
That's exactly my point. And I think we now, especially with youth, that message has not come across. With young people who are suffering the most when it comes to mental health, teens and young adults, we have sent the message that you need to be instantly successful, instantly famous. You have to look good all the time. You have to feel good all the time. And if you don't, and if you miss the mark, then your life is worthless. It's not just insidious, it's toxic. It's a toxic message. The fact that I myself have struggled with anxiety made me a substantially better therapist, a much researcher, I think a better friend, a better father, better husband. I parlayed my own experience of anxiety into positive areas of my life. The moments of crying on my wife's shoulder and literally have enhanced our relationship, but I'm not afraid to go there. I know that emotions are going to get tough sometimes, and I'm okay with it. Most people, that is not the message that we are sending.
Let's get back to something that I brought up at the beginning and see if we can try to isolate it a little. I want your opinion here. We know these feelings of anxiety have increased. You make the case. You've got the numbers. You know what's going on. We can see the tech has connected us. We can make comparisons to people. The young teen ladies can see the other young teen ladies. They're all constantly comparing. The guys are doing the same kind of thing in a different way, perhaps. Is it that simple? Is it that simple? Is it that simple that there's this crazy envy, jealousy? I want to be like them. They're ahead of me. I must get there. I must get to where they are. I can't get to where they are. I don't know how to do it. Is it at the root level that?
I don't think it's only about social comparisons. I think that technology has upended our mental health in a couple of ways. One, my computer is a lot smarter than I am. It's faster. It computes better. It never has a bad day. Or if it does have a bad day, I just replace it with another computer, which is better and faster and probably cheaper. It's disposable. If it does go wrong, then something's wrong with it. I'm not like that. Human beings are not like that. And through all of our experiences with technology, I think we've become desensitized to the fact that people are not perfect. We're like a sine wave. Sometimes we go up and sometimes we go down. And that's the way our emotions and our performance and our motivation and our health and everything is. Our finances, things go up and down. When things are going up, people feel great. But as soon as we start to take that curve, as soon as we start to hit a downward movement, instead of understanding, oh, that's called life, we get completely unmoored. Comparing ourselves to others is one piece of it, but I think technology has a more insidious effect. It's highly sensitized us to any level of struggle.
What has happened to leadership, to mentors. Look, America is the home of free speech. I love it, okay? This is social media, free speech. But at what point in time, if we had a certain disease that was running rampant and there was a way to mitigate it, I think political leaders would step up and say, hey, regardless of strife, we'd step up and say, hey, we can stop this. Now, I'm not saying to take the phones out of the hands of the 9-year-olds. Maybe I am. But how do we get to a place where the so-called leaders actually lead on this front? Because it does seem like things are out of control. You've actually made that case in this conversation so far. On the mental health side of things, the things are out of control. How do we get to a place where leadership can actually lead again?
It's a tough one. I'm not in the field, and I think it's easy for me to judge from the outside. I think there's a lot of pressure, whether it's Washington or in other countries in their capitals, of people to look good, feel good, perform at a highest level all the time. And it takes a lot of courage to resist that and to accept that I'm going to do what I can, move forward from a place of humility. I don't envy anybody in the position, I'll tell you.
At the, let's say, neighborhood level, if you make the case, teens are really struggling with their mental health right now. Okay, observant parents must be seeing this. Every point of the leadership spectrum, it seems to be, I don't know, everyone's got horse blinders on, or they're just refusing to look at it, or we've just come to accept it now. We come to accept it now that the young man gets out of college and he doesn't have anything to do. So he stays in mom's basement and just plays video games, and we just let him do it. And no one puts any pressure on him because he's doing what he loves. Just let him be him. Don't stress him out. It seems like there's this massive wave of all of this happening, and no one's just putting their foot down and saying, whoa, this is not how we used to do it.
Yeah, so I can speak to parents for sure. It's not even an era of helicopter parenting anymore. Helicopter parenting where you hover over above and you observe it, you videotape it and broadcast it. This is what's happening with my kid. This is what's happening with my kid now. What's going to be? Is it going to be this? Is it going to, like the news, right? Today it's called lawnmower parenting. And lawnmower parenting is where you actually take a device in front of your child, pave a path for them, and they walk on manicured foot, even ground.
I've not heard that one before. That is terribly sad.
It is sad. And the reason why is because we're raising a generation of children who we don't believe are capable of handling emotional distress. And as a result, they aren't capable. I gave a book talk yesterday, actually, at my high school. And the irony is that I was not the best student. I'm probably the least likely person from my graduating class to have come back and given a mental health talk. It was really funny. The old vice principal was there. I used to have a permanent seat in his office. It was a hilarious talk.
We had a lot in common.
We can chat after the show about that. Anyhow, this was such a bright moment to me. One of the students came up afterwards, and I gave over a lot of the ideas that we're speaking about today, that the reason why anxiety epidemic is because we're highly sensitized, and we have to understand that emotions are normal, negative emotions are normal, and we're going to have struggles sometimes, and we have to rise above it. And we have to, I'm not going to use the word toughen up, but toughen up.
You can use it and I can't use it. What's that?
I was kidding. I'm just
okay.
The student came over to me afterwards. She said, we've had a lot of mental health talks, as you can imagine. That was the best mental health talk. I'm like, wow, thanks. That's a great compliment from a 10th grader, 11th grader. And I said, why? And she said, because you empowered us. Everybody else is infantilizing us and saying you can't handle it, and reduce your stress and reduce your anxiety. And here's what you do to get rid of your depression. This is the first time ever that I've heard somebody say that I can handle it. Finally, I met somebody who believes in me. I almost cried.
To add to it as well, that's absolutely 100% valid. As I listen to you, though, too, we speak about some of the young people. I think there should be more of the, hey, go try that, and there's a good chance you're going to fail.
And that's okay.
Failing, you're going to find out. If you fail a lot, you're going to find out that's actually a good thing.
It's a great thing. I learned much more from my failures than my successes. No question. And from the struggles than when things are going well. It's not fun. It's not pleasant. It hurts, but it is a part of life and something that we've forgotten how to do.
I have talked to all kinds of guests on this podcast, but my quote claim to fame was I wrote all these investment books about a particular style of strategy. And the strategy is very quant. The interesting thing about it is you basically, if an opportunity happens, if the market starts to move, you take a position. You don't necessarily know what's going to happen. You have no idea what's going to happen, frankly, but you still take the position. You have a stop loss. You say, I will try, but if it doesn't work out, I get out and I know what my loss is in advance. I think that kind of thinking has just, as we're talking about in this conversation, has disappeared. People don't want to even try now even if they have a stop loss. Their stop loss is mom and dad is still sitting there. You're not going anywhere. So why don't you go get the bloody lip? Why don't you go try something? But if the parents and if society is not pushing this, and if kids go to school, the school is, I don't know how these types of lessons could truly be learned in school today, because frankly, school is reinforcing so many of the things we're talking about today. They're going the wrong direction. It is a vicious circle, isn't it?
It is. I fully agree with you that academic institutions need to be, I should say, supported or guided to allow students to fail and to encourage students to fail and to take experiments. If you're not going to fail when you're a kid, when are you going to fail? When you're an adult? When you have bigger responsibilities? When you have a family? When you have a business? When you have people counting on you? Then it's harder. Then it's legitimately harder and the pressure is higher. When you're a kid, when you're a teen, and when you're a young adult, that's your chance. Take it, fail, do it, blow things up. Not literally, but allow things to implode and be okay with it and sit with that distress and see what comes out of it.
In the last handful of years, to go back to something you said earlier, which was interesting, we were speaking about different groups, and you made the case that perhaps some marginalized groups have a better handle on dealing with adversity because perhaps they face it. Now, what's interesting about modern life, especially let's say the last 5, 6, 7 years, is it seems like, especially if I observe college campuses, it seems like that people are siloing themselves. I am this particular group, I'm this particular member, whatever. All the siloing to me, it's almost like the old Michelin Man commercial, that white Michelin Man that's got all of the Pillsbury Doughboy thing. There's all this protective wrap around everybody where it's, hold on, I'm talking to you right now. I'm a white guy who lives in a country of 100 million Vietnamese, okay? I'm a minority. I don't care. I enjoy it, whatever. But we don't hear enough of that. We don't hear enough of that. Everything's not going to be always so squeaky clean. Everything's going to be perfect. I find what I'm seeing on the college campuses, the siloing part, where I'm making up a term, but it's what it looks like to me. That doesn't seem to be helping the mental, okay, you don't want to use toughness, but the mental dexterity that we want to see in people, that doesn't seem to be helping as well.
It isn't. And I agree with your word, siloing. We have become more, not alone, but more lonely than ever. There's a difference between alone and lonely. Alone is when you literally have no one with you. Lonely is when, even though there are other people around you, you don't really show them your struggles. And when they struggle or when they do things that are upsetting, even offensive in some ways, we cut off the relationship as opposed to finding a way to continue, in some regards, a connection with that person. We've become so interpersonally stunted in our ability just to connect because of this same principle, because of this same concept. We can't handle distress. And guess what? The closest and best relationships you ever have with someone, those which are make life worth living, also cause you the most distress. That's just the way it is.
I had a friend this year in her 30s. It was a group of us. Something happened, and I don't know what she felt or whatnot, but she essentially removed herself from all connection with everybody. When you were describing what you just described, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what happened. Something in the group relationships, something in the individual relationships didn't jive with her. She didn't like it. Something went wrong. And instead of realizing, hey, we all like each other. This is a fun group of people. We all get along. But something triggered her. Instead of realizing it was a small bump to overcome, she took it as relationship killer. It's over. I don't want to see these people again.
Listen, if somebody is a psychopath, then yeah, cut off the relationship. If they are literally trying to hunt you, if they have malicious intent.
I've met 3 psychopaths in my life. She was not one of them.
That's funny. You've met more than I have. I guess because you were in business and I'm in psychology. I've met one person for sure and another person who I think was fairly sociopathic. And it was chilling. And in those rare cases, have I either distanced myself or encouraged patients to distance themselves. In other cases, it's more a matter of accepting the person's, I'm going to use the word idiosyncrasies, even though it could be worse than that. Their vices, their struggles, their bias, their blindness, their limitations, while remaining connected in some regards. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be the person who you cry on their shoulder. It doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be the best relationship ever, but it's a big difference if you're not able to say hello to them in the street, or if you never say hi, if you never connect with them, cut them off completely.
You brought up the business world part. I'll share this. What's interesting about the business world part is I've seen this. Okay, I got out safely from being involved with some of these people. But if people are, let's say, some narcissistic disorder, and they are in the business world, and let's say they have a name for themselves, that can be very seductive, meaning outsiders or newbies, they might not realize that this person they are looking up to is really not the person to be looking up to. It's a quite dangerous, very small minority of people that go in this direction. We're on a tangent, but let me flip you back to something, though, which I think is even more important, which is I think two of the things that I've seen you talk about when it comes to anxiety. It's a gift and it's a compass. That's brilliant type connecting of words. Most people, they're going to go through their whole life and they're never going to hear the word anxiety and gift in the same sentence. They're never going to hear anxiety and compass in the same sentence. But if you talk to a crazy person like me and I see somebody put those words in the same sentence, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I might not be in full agreement with David about everything. But when I see those words, I know that we're on the same page for the vast majority of things. Why don't I let you explain both of those? Anxiety is a gift and anxiety is a compass.
First, I want to clarify, I'm not saying it's fun. I'm not saying it's a joyful experience. Anxiety feels like death sometimes, but that doesn't mean that it can't be a compass and a gift. With regards to a compass, there's really two things. One, when I'm feeling super amped up, it's usually a sign that my body's saying, hey, David, you got to rein it in a little bit and you got to rebalance. And that's not for me, since I'm really pursuing a path that I value and I'm okay feeling, toughing it out, to use your word.
You're starting to like my terminology.
I am.
A former baseball catcher. There's where the word tough comes from.
I'm warming up. Since that's the case, I know that, okay, I got to get more sleep this week. I really got to hit the gym more. I got to recalibrate, rebalance, take some of the stress off my plate. But in another way, anxiety can be a compass telling us what we really want to do. I had a patient who came in. He was an EMT for many years, and we worked through his panic attacks. He used his anxiety to connect more with his wife, would actually really deepen their relationship in an amazing way. And we'll talk about that maybe when we get to the gift part. I asked him after we had worked through all this, which in of itself would have been a successful course of therapy, is there something in your life that you've always wanted to do, but you're just too scared to do it? It's always a mic drop moment, if you will, in therapy. Is there something in your life that you always wanted to do, but you're too scared? And he took the time to think about it and he said, yeah, go to college. No one in my family has ever graduated college. He himself had gotten a EMT certificate and he was very proficient, did great jobs on the ambulance and helping people and being a medical technician, but he'd never actually gotten a full degree. I think he had an associate's degree. I said, what's getting in the way? And he said, it's making me anxious to even think about, maybe I'll fail. And by that time in therapy, he already knew my perspectives on it. And he turned to me and he said, I guess that means that I should do it, right? If my anxiety is getting in the way, but I want to do this, then anxiety actually becomes my compass. And like, yeah, I'm going to conquer this. He did it. He thrived with his anxiety. He didn't let it get in the way. He actually knew, oh, this is making me anxious. You know what? That's it. I'm in. I'm going to do this.
In the middle of this conversation, you make me want to go down every failure I've had in my life and then what I did after the failure. Because that could be a great exercise for all of us to whatever age we want to start with. List all the failures and then what happened after.
If you can handle it, maybe start with one or two and maybe something recent.
I'm handling them all. Why not?
I'm glad I'm pumping you up. I'm fired up too. And this is something I try to do as well. By the way, it is my personal practice to try to learn from those failures and struggles and mistakes. This is a counterculture, and I think there's a lot of factors moving people in the other way. With regards to a gift, I think the interpersonal relationships is really the biggest factor. Let me ask you, the people who you're closest with in your life, are those the ones who you can really show them when you're having a, if you will, vulnerable, struggling, hard day or hard period of your life? Or the ones who think that everything's perfect all the time?
Oh, absolutely. Can share anything.
Hopefully everyone is blessed to have one or two people like that. It doesn't have to be on your Instagram feed. It doesn't have to be live for the world to see that you've struggled. You don't have to amplify it for all parties. But it's an amazing thing. If you struggle emotionally, you can parlay that into relationships and to create human connection in a way that enhances emotional intimacy and even physical intimacy. It's an amazing thing that the more vulnerable we are, the more we can open up about our anxiety to people who we love, the more it can enhance our connection with them.
You mentioned earlier, I think you said something about, do you say 1,000 clients? You have a much wider responsibility than I probably have. I have truly become the free agent warlord, so to speak, because I've found as I've got older, if I can avoid, when it comes to my work life, I love my work, but if I can avoid having too much responsibility over too many other people, the work life becomes a million times more rewarding and a million times less stressful. After an assorted number of failures over time, an assorted number of bad experiences, you find that place at a certain age where it's, oh, this is my optimal place. And even if something bad happens to me right now, okay, it's not going to really stick with me because what's going to happen next? I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go do yoga. I'm going to do something and it's going to go away, snap, bam, gone within 24 hours. Unless it's some kind of love life problem, because then that's more intricate. This is the perspective that I use. Let me keep it at the gift, though, a little bit more in terms of, I guess when I see anxiety as a gift, if I was to look back over time, over my own life, it's, okay, yeah, you're right. Some of those times didn't feel so great. Actually, I can think of one of the times where I was dealing with somebody who was probably one of these people I never should have been in close proximity with. But it was a gift to go through it, because then it gives you an awareness. It gives you an awareness where it's, okay, if I even come close to something like that again in the future, oh, move on. You don't even allow yourself to get entangled. And I think that's part of maybe what today a lot of young people don't have. If you're not out there failing, you're not out there learning. And if you're not learning, then how do you know? Then if you're just stuck in social media, we're back to the vicious circle again.
100%. Yeah, it can also enhance our relationship with ourselves and just increase our sense of confidence. I grew up in Canada. We talked about the school system before. There's an interesting phenomenon here. In the United States, and my kids have this, unfortunately, in order to get an A on a test, on a paper, in a class, you need to have a 90% or higher, right? Did you have that?
When I was in high school, it was 92 was a B plus and 93 was an A.
Wow, even higher. So it's even worse. In Canada, do you know what an A is? 80%, which is actually fantastic. And I'll tell you why. Because in order to get an A, it's actually harder. The last 10%, there are only like 2 kids in the class of 300 who are going to get 95, 98. Those are for the super nerdy, and it was not me, but super elite, highly intellectual, gifted kids are going to get a 90 and 95, which means that you can be an A student and you can still fail in 15% of the material, which gives you more room to grow. So I think it's such a healthy educational policy. And I think kids in Canada are actually more resilient in part as a result of this.
You're going to send me on a side tangent here. You're bringing up another issue, which I think is terribly important as well, which just gets into the basics of the educational system. And if the educational system is primarily built on memorization, which it is and was and has been, that did not motivate a kid like me. Hold on, why am I going to waste my time memorizing stuff? What game am I playing here? If I memorize all this stuff, what am I going to be, a good little boy and I'm going to get a good little job and someone's going to pat me on my head and when I'm 75, I'm going to get a gold watch?
Oh my God, you sound like my kid.
It did not resonate with me. I think that this is another really big issue, the whole idea of the educational system, which is fairly novel in the last, 150 years, the way we do it currently. This could be another part of the anxiety. If you don't get the grades and you don't get into the right college, then your life is over. Okay, I didn't go to the right colleges. I don't even relate to that. I actually look at it as an opportunity that if so many people believe they've got to do X, Y, Z, and they don't have any experience to know that's not true, that's an opportunity for me.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thinking today is not rewarded. And the reason why is because it's messy. You're going to judge someone's thinking. Are they thinking this way? Are they thinking that way? It's not as objective, if you will. And then you have to work through that. And people, teachers, administrators, students, parents, they're like, you know what? Forget it. Just get them to memorize stuff and move on. And it's such a shame. It's a shame because we are not promoting thinking. We're not promoting dealing with adversity, dealing with challenges. And that to me, again, getting back to your point about the gift, my point, I guess, about the gift of anxiety, we are so bent on getting rid of our distress as opposed to embracing the messiness, embracing the difficulty and dealing with uncertainty, dealing with the fact that life is uncontrollable. And we're just plummeting into an abyss of emotional distress as a result. It's such a sad thing to see.
One of the directions you go in your work, the rhetorical question, what do you love, essentially, as a possible direction for one to go down their life path, which I think is perfectly reasonable, rational, and probably works for a good number of people. I think there's a counter to that, though, too, is that a lot of people might not realize that they might take on some task they don't love, they don't like, perhaps, when they start. But an interesting thing happens if you start to master something that you never expected to like or you even enjoy. But if you start to master it, next thing you know, you're like, hold on, I love this thing that I never expected to be involved in. And it came from the mastery. It came from gaining the confidence inside the mastery. And so we can direct kids to say, hey, what do you love as one option? But I think sometimes for some kids that are having a hard time making choices, when I say kids, it could be adults too. hey, you should just do this. Just trust me and just do this. Even if you don't trust me, you've got to do this. And I think that's part of something we've lost in society too, is where the people that perhaps have more experience to talk about these particular issues sometimes are shut out because we've developed this society of, hey, we're all number one. We all know what's going on. We all can make the best decisions. And a lot of people don't have the experience of failure to do that. So they are fragile.
100%. Doing social science, you have to manage data sets, and it is so tedious. Oh my God. You got to get all your columns in a row, all your rows you have to check all your data, you have to tabulate, you have to make sure things are in order, you have to make sure the participant IDs didn't get corrupted. And any number of variables, there's about 4 or 5 major, simple, different statistical methods you can use. And then there's the complex stuff once you're actually delving into the data set. Writing one empirical paper, it's an incredible labor. And I remember when I started doing it, it was just hell. No one's going to even read it anyway. And what's the point in all this? And what am I doing? And my mentors are like, yeah, it's hard. If you want to be successful as an academic, though, this is the path. No one's saying it's easy. And it was so great that they validated the fact that it was going to be hard, but they continued to encourage me to face that distress, to face that uncertainty, and to plow ahead. Eventually, things moved ahead, but it took a long time. Wow, it was not easy.
Do you think you were lucky in the sense that you were able to escape or have good experiences inside academia where you can come out as somebody who's taking stances that you might not necessarily hear in the mainstream media? You're confident to take these stances, whereas I can make casual observations of what I see coming out of a lot of college campuses, and there's a lot of groupthink, there's a lot of mob rules, and there's a lot of, if you go too far out on the ledge there, which I keep waiting for the day that I'm going to say something wrong on this podcast and maybe they'll nix me. I don't know how it works these days, but you realize that you sound different. There are plenty of academics that sound, when I sometimes have conversations, and I try to avoid conversations where it looks clearly going to be something where you check out some details and you're like, oh man, it's just, I'm not seeing anything that gives me the feeling that this person can have an open conversation. Now, you must know this, that if somebody even just looks casually at your world, you're like, oh, I think I can probably have an open conversation with David. I think there's going to be some give and take. I think we can go back and forth. But you must see this in your own life where it's, you bump into some adults and you're like, man, they're in deep and they're not coming out. I'm not going to bring them out. They've got their stances, they're hardcore, and that's it.
I will tell you very clearly, feel extremely blessed to be within an academic department that truly values academic freedom and to be able to pursue ideas that are going to advance the mental health of the world, even to be able to do this kind of podcast and to be able to write a book with HarperCollins, to have trade nonfiction as an academic. At my level of my career, my department's been extremely supportive of forward-facing activity because they recognize that the mental health crisis is so real and we need to throw whatever we can at it, and to do so in a way that actually elevates people. It's not only within the recesses of the ivory tower. Yeah, I think McLean Hospital is an incredible institution. I feel very blessed to work there. Getting to that stage was very challenging and did involve all that tedious data managing and publishing. And there's obviously still academic performance that I have to achieve on a regular or semi-regular basis. Ultimately, looking back, I think that most of it has just come together with a lot of good luck, and the experiences that I had that were sometimes challenging, those in many ways were the greatest gift.
Absolutely. There you go. You brought it full circle back to the gift. The book, Thriving with Anxiety, 9 Tools to Make Your Anxiety Work for You. I did not attempt to take you down the path of outlining the 9 tools today. People will have to go read the book and check out the details. Of course, we talked about a lot of these issues generally, and people can start to understand where you're going. But again, they got to jump in and do some reading. Hey, David, where's the book, Amazon, all that kind of fun stuff? Where's the best place if people want to check you out? Where can they go?
Check me out and also get in touch. I'd love to hear from people who've read the book and what they're thinking. My author's website, DHRosmarin, ROSMARIN.com. And there are some free giveaways. So if people do purchase the book, my marketing team put together, a 12-page guide based on the book, and then a 1-page cheat sheet that people can get. So there's all sorts of fun stuff on the website because we really want to get this information out to try to empower people, keep the messages simple, try to help people to not get rid of their anxiety, but to change our relationship with it and to thrive with it instead.
Did you have any anxiety today when I started talking that you think, oh my gosh, this guy might be going in a direction that's a little dangerous?
I did. I appreciate you asking.
Yes.
You did trigger me a little. And I actually appreciated it because it gave me an opportunity to practice what I preach, which I already have a fair amount of. The issues are complicated. I think we shouldn't shy away from the complexities of the conversation.
It's great for someone like you and so many professors to have a conversation. Okay, I've done my undergraduate, I did my MBA, all this kind of stuff. I've written a bunch of books. But I think it's great for people that are coming from academia to have conversations like people like me, especially if you're willing to have that give and a take, because sometimes it is a little too ivory tower. I'm sure I could have taken this conversation very ivory tower and you would have gone right there with me. I didn't want you to be there. I wanted you to have that feeling of, oh man, I hope Mike doesn't say something that's good. Oh man, please stay on the straight and narrow, Mike, please. David, great stuff. Please keep me posted on future work.
Thank you. I really appreciate the conversation today.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.